The chief of Russia's Wagner group is dead. That fatal plane crash that resulted in Yevgeny Prigozhin's death has now become the center of West's allegations against the Russian president. Well, Russia has refuted all these theories. So the question, of course, is, was there a bomb on the plane? Was the incident actually a revenge by Vladimir Putin against the Wagner chief? Was Prigozhin living essentially on borrowed time ever since the mutiny? These are questions that are all at this moment unresolved. But at a makeshift Wagner Group memorial in St. Petersburg, people paid their tributes to the Wagner chief. Flowers were laid and candles were lit. Prigozhin's death will, of course, leave the Wagner Group virtually headless for the moment.
Считаю своим долгом почтить память погибших в авиакатастрофе. Считаю своим долгом почтить память своего земляка, героя России, Евгения Викторовича Пригожина. Я считаю, это человек очень достойный, человек очень много сделал для имиджа России, для успехов на полях СВО. Поэтому я здесь сегодня. Поэтому покой Господи его душе.
Это отразится не только на эффективности, но и на всем, в том числе личные контакты Пригожина и остальных командиров, которые они имеют в Африке и во всем мире. Новые контакты наложить, получится ли так же или в той же мере, это вопрос.
Denied any involvement in the suspected death of Wagner mercenary head Yevgeny Prigozhin. Western politicians and commentators have suggested, without evidence, that Prigozhin was assassinated on Moscow's orders. Prigozhin's failed mutiny, exactly 2 months before the crash, was the biggest challenge to President Vladimir Putin's rule since he came to power in 1999. But, speaking on Friday, Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said allegations that Russia gave an order to kill him were a complete lie.
There is now a great deal of speculation surrounding this plane crash and the tragic deaths of the plane's passengers, including Yevgeny Prigozhin. Of course, in the West, all of this speculation is presented from a well-known angle. All of this is an absolute lie.
Russia's aviation authority has said Prigozhin was on board a private jet, which crashed on Wednesday evening northwest of Moscow, with no survivors. But Peskov declined to definitively confirm his death, citing the need to wait for test results. Despite this, on Thursday, Putin publicly sent his condolences to the families of those killed and spoke of Prigozhin in the past tense, saying he made some serious mistakes. Western politicians have suggested, again without evidence, that Putin ordered Prigozhin to be killed in order to punish him for launching the June mutiny. Russian investigators have opened a probe into what happened, but have not yet said what they suspect caused the plane to fall from the sky. Nor have they officially confirmed the identities of the 10 bodies recovered from the wreckage. British military intelligence said on Friday that it is highly likely Prigozhin is dead. The Pentagon has said its own initial assessment is that Prigozhin was killed. Russia's Baza news outlet, which has good sources among law enforcement agencies, has reported that investigators are focusing on a theory that 1 or 2 bombs may have been planted on board the plane.
All right, now to give us more insights in terms of what exactly is happening in the aftermath of Yevgeny Prigozhin's death, we're being joined in by Mr. Glenn Deason, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He's joining us live from Oslo. Now, Mr. Deason, this is something that is going to be talked about for a very long time. What actually resulted in Yevgeny Prigozhin's death? There are questions that are being raised about whether he's even dead at all. But the fact is, Vladimir Putin has now offered his condolences. But is this a case where Yevgeny Prigozhin was done in because of the mutiny that he had staged against the Russian forces 2 months ago? Or do you think that this was actually an accident?
Well, it doesn't seem likely to be an accident. It's too big of a coincidence, I guess. So the speculation, of course, goes around. Some arguing that it was from the Kremlin. Others argue there was perhaps some rogue elements in the Russian government. Others pointed to the United States. Other looks towards Ukraine or simply some of the enemies that Prigozhin built up over the years before, well, effectively the Kremlin pulled a lot of his protection. But while of course there would be, based on opportunity, it would make a lot of sense to point at Russia, and also some arguments that points against it. For example, this was done in the middle of the BRICS meeting, which was immensely important to Russia. They did this on the territory of the Russian Federation, which was a very public death instead of having him disappear or die in Africa. And there was, and also this happened at the eve as Wagner is returning onto the battlefield in the war. So it's also very strange time to disorganized and create so much chaos within the group. So it is a mystery, but again, I haven't excluded any possibility yet.
Now, what happens to the Wagner mercenary group per se? Because it was such an important strategic asset for the Russians, not only for the fact that it was fighting in Ukraine, but also because so actively involved in other theaters of conflict, such as in West Africa and even in Syria.
Well, I think they're going to keep Wagner because it's like private military companies have a lot of benefits. They bring in a lot of special expertise and specialization. They have flexibility. You also have reduced risk of casualty because they're very specialized. Also, they're more politically acceptable casualties as they're simply working in a military company as opposed to someone who's conscripted. You know, it's resource saving. Sometimes they even make money when they're working abroad. And the best of all, of course, is plausible deniability. If Russia would have to use them to, for example, do an attack against, limited attack against Poland or another NATO country, they could be quite useful. So they will want to keep them, but they transferred so far most of the heavy weapons away from Wagner and a lot of the ammunition because they simply became too powerful and too unreliable. So this, again, would be the disadvantage of private military corporations. So I think they're going to look to reform it, new leadership, not so centered only around the organization, possibly more loyalty towards the state, effectively overcoming some of these disadvantages which we see with private military corporations.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Deason, for joining us and getting us all those details then.
My pleasure.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.